I met our guest today, Tom Bogle, several years ago due to our shared passion for economics and entrepreneurship. And I'm thrilled to have him on the show today. Tom is a former public school teacher turned microschool guide and now co founder of Microschool Solutions, an organization that helps to activate new microschools across the US and support new founders. Tom Bogle, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thanks, Gary. I'm really excited to be here with you.
I'm really excited to have you here. As I said, we met several years ago through our kind of shared collaboration with FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. You've written some articles for FEE. I'm of
Right.
course, a senior fellow at FEE, and FEE hosts this podcast. And it's just great to kind of think back to our, early conversations about economics and entrepreneurship, and then to see that we've also kind of followed along this similar path toward education entrepreneurship and microschools and alternative
Right.
education more generally. So great to be along with you for the ride. I'd love
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to start with sort of your background and experience. You were teaching in public schools, you taught entrepreneurship. Tell us a little bit about your experience kind of as an educator in the conventional system, why you got into that space initially, what that experience was like for you.
Oh goodness, that's a long story, so I'll try to keep it relatively succinct. Um, I found that I was naturally gifted at being able to take complex ideas and convey them to people in a way that was simple and easy to understand. And I thought that the only way to make a career out of that was to teach in a public school setting, because that's where teachers teach, right? You teach in the public school, and that's kind of what the society reinforces, right? Which is very ironic because as a child, I was educated in a combination of private, public, and charter schools. So I had experienced educational choice and education freedom as a youth, but then as an adult, where's the jobs? Well, the jobs are in the public school. So um, I went back to school. Pursuing education was a secondary career for me, and I went through the kind of this alternative certification path. I got a master's degree in education, and I thought, this is great. This is fun. I love this. And then I got into the classroom and I understand why the average teacher burns out in 4 to 5 years. Because in the classroom, you don't have the ability, generally speaking. I know there's a few exceptions out there, but you generally don't have the ability to do the things that you know are best educational practices. There's both institutional constraints in terms of what your school will allow you to do, what your administration specifically will allow you to do, but then just the class sizes, the structure of the school day, the way that the entire thing is set up. And it puts all of these constraints on you, to where you find yourself kind of just getting by, just getting. And I was trying to do this, trying to teach economics and entrepreneurship in the best way I knew how. That's why I got connected with Fee and how you and I eventually met. And I was really gung ho about teaching students real life entrepreneurship. So we would do a project where we'd use a business model canvas. We'd write a business plan. We would execute during school in a market day style activity, um, that is starting to catch on like wildfire all around the country for youth. But we would do this on school campuses, and it became apparent to me very quickly that my students didn't see this as a real world experience of entrepreneurship. They approached this as just another school project. And I would say, guys, let's think outside the box a little bit. Like, yeah, we can do our fun little market day activity. You'll make a few bucks possibly, but some of you have brilliant ideas, and I have access to, these small startup companies, to venture capital firms. Let's get you in front of even just presenting to one of these organizations to share your idea and get real feedback from real entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. In the 8 full years that I spent in the classroom, I did not have a single student take me up on that offer because they just saw it as another school project. Now, fortunately, now that many of them are adults and grown up, I've been able to be in contact with them. Many of them have gone on to pursue entrepreneurial ventures. But what I found is in that space, in that moment, the concepts that I was trying to teach and the institution in which I was trying to teach them were in direct conflict with each other.
Mm.
And the institution won every time.
Yeah,
So I
and you
had to get
decided yeah,
out.
you just and you decided to homeschool your own kids
Right.
while you were still teaching in the public schools. Was that also because of what you were seeing as a teacher, or what was that process like?
Yeah, in large part it was kind of that conveyor belt mentality. It's just a school project, playing the game of school, just do enough to get by. I was a student who skated through school. I could do school very effectively. Um, and I didn't have to apply myself very much. I didn't have to actually learn. I loved learning. I didn't always love what was being taught. Right. And so for me, my school was very much a game. And then as I was teaching, I would regularly ask students for feedback on myself, their experience with me, on the class. And I had a student who was just straight A student, honor roll, student council, the part of the traveling choir for our school. And she gave me feedback one time, and the opening line of her feedback paragraph was, "Mr. Bogle, I hate your class and I don't like you much either." It got my attention, right? So I read the rest of it with earnest understanding that it takes a lot of courage
Mm.
for her to be that honest. The rest of this feedback letter was heartbreaking. She said, "I can't thrive with the level of freedom and responsibility that you gave us in your classroom." And I was just heartbroken that we have created a system that churns out students that don't know what to do with freedom and responsibility. And at that point, I said, "No, I can't do this to my own kids." And I'm honestly having a hard time doing it with other people's kids as well, which is why I was trying to make it so real, so authentic. And so my wife, who was also a full-time high school teacher previously, um, was very much against homeschooling for our family, for our children. I remember for about 6 months, homeschooling became a forbidden word in our household. I was not allowed to talk about it. And then our fourth grader, I believe he was in fourth grade at the time, started coming home with about 2.5 hours of homework every night. Um, his teacher was trying to do what she understood to be the implementation of the flipped classroom strategy. And how that played out for us was he did fun crafts and activities and games at school and then would come home and fight with his parents about homework for 2 hours, um, which made our family life absolutely miserable. Like, these are our children. We want to have a strong bond with them. And so we decided we couldn't let the institution of school get in the way of our relationship as parents with our children. She shocked me one day and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about homeschooling the kids." And we pulled them out in the middle of the school year and started homeschooling and just had a blast. And I understand that was a lot for her to take on. That was challenging, and did a phenomenal job. It didn't always work out the way we had hoped, but that's what homeschooling is. It's an experience of trial and error and helping your children see that you're learning by making mistakes as well. That's the process of learning. So we homeschooled for a number of years. We experimented with a handful of small startup private schools. Um, and but eventually I had to make my way out of public education. I couldn't be a part of that anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if you could share that story. I mean, you talked about this heartbreaking letter you received from a student, but it was even greater heartbreak that ultimately led you to leave the public system. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to apologize to your listeners up front about how emotional I'm about to get. Um, I had a number of students who struggled with mental health issues, um, in large part because school was an anxiety inducing environment for them. I had a student of mine who missed several weeks of school, after an attempt to take his own life, and the hospitalization that followed that. And as we went to a kind of a parent teacher conference with all of his teachers, the school counselors, to try to come up with a plan, a strategy to help him kind of reintegrate back into the school day, um, it frustrated me to no end that every other person in the room, and I don't know the intention of their heart, but the words that I heard were, school is the place he needs to be. School is the place he needs to be. School is the best environment for him. And I wanted to just grab this mom by the shoulders and say, take your child and run, because this is not the place that he needs to be. Um, and for a few weeks after that, my classroom was considered a safe space for him. If he was struggling with any other class that he was in, um, he was able to get up and walk out, tell the teacher, I'm going to talk to Mr. Bogle, and had free license to come to my classroom. Um, and I that lasted for a handful of weeks, and I never got the opportunity to have that conversation with his mother, because the next time I spoke to her was at that young man's funeral. Because even with all of these additional interventions and trying to connect, it was not a space where he felt seen, valued, heard, and it just wasn't a healthy environment for him to be in. And there are certainly more underlying factors. I don't want to say that school is the reason this young man took his own life, um, but it was certainly a contributing factor. And at that point, that's when I decided, I can't do this. I've got to try to make my exit. I'm trying to figure out what my plans are for the future. That was when I discovered a, it's right here on my bookshelf, Joel Hammond's book, The Teacher Liberation Handbook, right? And I thought, this is it. I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna start my own thing, but I've got to be able to spend some time in development and get it working, and make sure that this is going to be an effective program for my students. How do I convince parents to pay me to educate their children? Am I crazy? How do I do this? Um, I'll teach for another year. I'll teach for 2 more years, and then I'll pursue that. The following year, we had a very serious situation where 9 days before the end of the school year, um, a senior, a star athlete, um, brought a gun onto campus and took his own life there on campus in the middle of the school day.
Hmm.
Um, and while I did not have a strong relationship with this young man personally, some of his best friends were in my classroom on lockdown, not knowing everything that was going on, and learning through Twitter
Hmm.
what had happened. Um, and as much as I cared for these young people, I was in no position to help them deal with that experience in any meaningful way that could create, I've got 35 kids hiding under computer desks in my classroom, just bawling their eyes out. how do I connect with each and every one of them in that moment? And we were in there for hours, um, with no information, no updates, no word, no recourse. Um, and that was the day I said, I can't. That was my John Taylor Gatto moment. I can't do this anymore. If you can find me a job where I don't have to hurt kids for a living, you know, I'll be looking. And fortunately, that was when I got a call from a mutual friend, Isaac Morehouse, and was able to work with him on an educational startup for a brief period of time. Worked then with another mutual friend, Connor Boyack, on an educational startup for a brief period of time, all while trying to go through this process of starting my own small independent learning center, and not being able to get over some of the mental hurdles. Primarily, how do I convince parents to pay me, who they don't know, to educate their child? An opportunity came my way a short period of time later. I started hearing about micro schools, and they were becoming a thing. um, Actually, let me take a step back just a
Mm,
real little bit,
please.
because one of the things that I was doing in the process of all of this was I saw some of my colleagues who are gifted and talented educators leaving the classroom because they were getting just as frustrated with the system as I was. um, and for them, it was not about the politics. It wasn't about government funding. It wasn't about any of that. They just saw that the school system was not allowing them to be the kind of teacher that they knew they could be, and so they would leave. And they would not just go and continue in education in other venues. They were going and becoming real estate agents and insurance salespeople. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but man, you've got a gift. There's got to be other venues for you to be able to go out and help children learn. And so I started a blog where all I was doing was identifying alternative learning environments for other teachers to try to tell them, hey, this is an option. You can do this. Discovered OutSchool when it was still very, very new, um, and a handful of these other learning platforms. And that's where I first discovered Prenda as an organization before they even got into the micro school space. I didn't know that if this would turn into a life-changing experience for me. So after I had left the classroom and had spent a few years trying to help get my own learning program up and off the ground while helping run some of these other educational startups, I attended an information session to talk about micro schools, where other people were talking about micro schools specifically through Prenda. And my intention was to go there and meet with the founder, Kelly Smith. Love the man, tons of respect for him. And I was going to tell Kelly, nope, you're doing the K through 8 stuff, but you need high school, and I'm going to launch high school for you. Uh, that started a long and fruitful relationship with Prenda, where I was able to run a micro school. My micro school served students in grades 3 through 7. I ran that for a year during the beginning of the pandemic. Absolutely life changing for me, for some of my children. uh, and then got me into the position where I was now helping other people launch micro schools in partnership with Prenda. Um, love it, love it, love it. Tons of respect for everything that they're doing and have been doing. But I also got to a point where I saw that for the micro school space as a whole to continue growing, there needed to be more diversity in that space. That if people only had one option, even a flexible option, that if they didn't have support for doing their own things, then they were simply going to lump Prenda as and microschools together as one entity. And if they didn't have a great experience within their Prenda microschool, we're going to leave the world of microschools altogether. And so I wanted to help people design and build microschools of diverse educational models, different kinds of educational philosophies, different specializations within those microschools. And that's what led me to start my microschool solutions with my co-founder Rochelle, and we've just been having a great time helping people launch microschools. And I am always in awe of the brilliant ideas that people have. So many of them go, but I don't know if I can do this. It's like, what's stopping you? You know, the hurdles that I couldn't overcome mentally several years ago. Well, now I've helped hundreds of people overcome those same hurdles.
Mm.
And there's additional support tools and resources and advocacy groups and financing options. And there's so many more options that are available now. Man, we are on the cusp of just an amazing education revolution. And I'm so excited to be here for the ride.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. I do think we're just at the very beginning of this sort of micro school movement and all kinds of different alternative education options. There's so much that you said in your reflections of your experience as a teacher, and then your pathway into alternative education, micro schools. And I just want to stop maybe for a moment and think about the quote that you shared from John Taylor Gatto. Of course,
Hmm.
many of my listeners and viewers will be familiar with Gatto's work. He wrote Dumbing Us Down, Weapons of Mass Instruction. He was the New York State Teacher of the Year and famously quit his job as a teacher in New York in the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal in 1991, where he
Right.
said, I can no longer hurt children to make a living. And you were sort of paraphrasing him as well and in thinking about that too. So I wonder what it is that you think is so different about these decentralized learning options, microschools, pods, other kinds of alternative education, learning models that helps you to not hurt children. Like, what is it about these models that are more humane, perhaps,
Sure.
than the conventional classroom?
I think that there's a couple factors in this. First, as you mentioned, the decentralized nature of them means that each individual micro school needs to find something that makes it unique. And maybe not unique on a national or international scale, but unique within its own community. And so the students and the families who are looking for that kind of program are going to find better alignment in terms of their values, their educational goals and ambitions, um, or even just like the type of learning experience they want to have. They're going to find better alignment there, and that's going to be the first way that we're going to be a little bit more humane. The second is as a distributed network of micro schools, you have increased options. So not only can I find the fit that works for me or my student, but I also know that if I'm in an environment that ultimately isn't a fit, I can go somewhere else. For a lot of micro school founders, that's a challenge. That's an emotionally difficult thing to experience when you've invested heart and soul into the learning of a child and the family says, great, thank you, we appreciate the work you've done, but this isn't the learning environment for us. Guys, that is a blessing. That is not something that you need to take offense to. That is a blessing that the families know that they can step away and find something else, because what that means is that the families that stay with you are in better alignment with what your mission or your vision is. And the families where there is conflict have other places that they can go. Like, that's a feature of this system, not a bug. It doesn't necessarily make the news easier to hear in the moment, right? But to me, that is one of the best programs out there, or best aspects of micro schools out there. Now, within the micro schools themselves, now we're usually working with much smaller class sizes. We're working with a much tighter student to teacher ratio. Um, there is the concept, and some of your listeners are probably familiar with this concept of the Dunbar number. And this is really the maximum number of people that you can maintain any kind of relationship with, even as an acquaintance, right? And my understanding is the theory is it fluctuates between somewhere between 150 and 180 people at any given time. As a high school teacher, I had 175 students in my classes every semester, which meant that every personal friend I had, any acquaintance I had outside of the school setting, took away attention from my students. And this isn't even a close relationship. This is a loose connection, right? Um, Working within a micro school, now I'm able to develop personal relationships with these students. We are big advocates for no greater than a 10 students to one adult in the room ratio. Certainly there are people who are going to go above that, and I'm not here to try to tell them what to do or how to serve their students. But in my own experience, I found that once you start creeping up into 11, 12, 13 students, the individual starts to merge with the collective. And you're now teaching a class as opposed to teaching individual students,
Mm.
or rather facilitating the learning of individual students, because that's where you get into your classroom management strategies instead of building relationships, right? You get into um, focusing on efficiency within instructional models rather than efficacy and personalized learning and growth. Uh, Being able to address the individual needs of students rather than the collective needs of an institution, that radically changes the way you approach every single child. Um, and that makes all the difference in the experience of those children.
Yeah, and of the teachers, right? So that
Oh,
not only are the
100%.
learners more joyful and having a more rewarding educational experience, but the teachers are able to really let their gifts shine and their creativity emerge. So I think that
Absolutely.
that's so great. So tell us more about Microschool Solutions, what you and Rochelle have created, how it works, how you work with prospective founders. If someone is listening to this podcast and is curious about the steps to involved in kind of launching a microschool, how would Microschool Solutions help them?
Sure, absolutely. We will start first by listening to you. What do you want to do? Uh, I talked very early on about running my entrepreneurship classes and using a tool called the business model canvas to help my students think and act like entrepreneurs. Well, now as an organization, we've taken that same format and customized it specifically to micro school founders to help them think like entrepreneurs and business startups as well. So we've designed the micro school blueprint as our version of the business model canvas that helps you look at both the educational model of your micro school, but then also the business model of your micro school as well. And we'll hear what you have to say, what you want to do, what are your dreams, hopes, and ambitions. Fantastic. Where do we see some gaps? Where do we see some opportunities for partnerships, opportunities to grow, opportunities to connect with other micro schools or other service providers, so that now you can provide a more holistic educational experience while staying true to your mission and vision that you've started up? Many people are coming into this uh, with a lot of either educational experience, but the micro school environment might be new to them, or they they're used to a traditional classroom, but man, they'd love to get started using a more Montessori style approach they don't know where to go, how to get started, how to run the business. So we'll help them by mapping this out and then identifying what are the skills and strengths that they already have as as an individual. What are the skills, characteristics, and strengths that they might want to work on developing personally that are going to help them succeed? And then we've got a customized course that we can put them through, or they can really kind of direct themselves through. I think that's one of the things that we have done that is really unique in this space is we're big fans of student directed education within the micro school space. Um, and anyone who has been a teacher will tell you that they sat through countless lectures explaining to them the ineffectiveness of lecture as an instructional method, right? We were all taught that way. So if we're going to advocate for student directed education, could our training program also be student directed? Can we provide a scaffolded structure, but then gives them choice, gives them space to create their own learning objectives, identify their own tools, their own projects, their own desired outcomes, and measures for success, and support them in that process so that they now get a taste of how powerful that type of learning can be. So now when they're in the micro school with their students, the urge to grab hold of the reins of the classroom isn't there because they've seen the beauty that can come out of that chaotic feeling learning environment, right? So we have that program plus additional coaching, support, mentoring, um, networking with other micro school founders who are in this space. There's so much that we can do that's really customizable to what
Mhm.
anyone who wants to get into, and not just micro schools, um, because we use the term micro school very much as an umbrella term,
Right.
right?
Yeah, me too. Mhm.
So this, homeschool co-ops, people who want to run kind of um, small camps, I would love, and I know they're starting to pop up, and I love, love, love this. The idea of like world schooling hubs
Right.
where families can go from Costa Rica to Bali to Portugal, and they're part of this kind of homeschooling or micro schooling community, world schooling network there. So they know that their family can travel around and get that kind of experience. Yeah, we'll help people design things like that. Um,
Right.
so
So
that's kind of a quick overview of our products and services and what we do to help micro school founders. But also, we understand that while we've got some experience in this field, that we're not necessarily going to be the experts in their vision or in how to make that vision become a reality. So really, we view ourselves not as a launch program, but as a launch partner. We're trying
mm,
to work with people on realizing their vision, rather than trying to impose our vision on them.
I love that. And of course, there are certainly founders who go off on their own and
Mhm.
don't, partner with others, or they choose not to be part of a micro school incubator or accelerator program. But there
Right,
are many who do,
right,
particularly as you say, maybe they've been lifelong teachers, but aren't necessarily well versed in the entrepreneurship piece or the running a small business side. And so you can help with
exactly.
that. So what is the financial model for you? I guess how would people access your services? Is it a membership fee? What is the model there?
Yeah, actually, we've been experimenting with a number of different things. Still a relatively new organization, but what we're working with right now is a subscription based model, um, with multiple tiers depending both on where you are in the process. If you're in the early exploratory phases, you don't need the level of intensity that we can provide, but you do want to be part of the community. You do want to gain access to coaching and expertise as you're starting to navigate your research. Once you're in the actual planning and preparatory stages, then there would be more advanced levels of support, that would bump you up to a different subscription tier for a few months at a time, probably. If you are gung ho and I need to start a micro school in about a month and a half, great, let's go. That's going to be a little bit more intense and a little bit more expensive. But then after you've launched, now you can drop down to a much more affordable subscription tier. It's kind of funny because anyone who's kind of in this startup space, really their ideal should be, I want to help people get to a point where they no longer need my services. And I know there's organizations out there that have that built into their financial model, where even though you don't need me anymore, I'm still getting a small cut of the pie because I helped you. Great. It helps you see that I have skin in the game from very early on. Fantastic. And that's working for them. Um, but yeah, if people want to learn a little bit more about the products and services that we offer, microschool solutions.org. I know the hyphen in the middle throws people for a loop. Um, or they can reach out to me at tom at microschool solutions .com as well.
So
So
it's .com.
it
Yes,
is .com.
.com.
Did I say .org? I'm sorry.
Microschool-solutions.com.
.com.
And we'll
Yes.
put a link to that in the show notes as well. So, Tom, as you see these prospective founders come to you and you help them on their journey to launch, some of them have already launched. What are you seeing that makes you optimistic that not only are we just at the beginning of this sort of decentralized education revolution, but that you believe it's sort of sustainable, long lasting, and the sky is the limit?
One of the most powerful things that I'm seeing are people advocating for their own communities, however you want to define that, right? Some people are looking at their communities on a geographic level, some people looking at their communities along religious lines or linguistic lines, along lines of ethnic heritage, however you want to look at that. um, that they're advocating for the needs of their community. They're advocating for the needs of students who have been historically marginalized by the education system, um, BIPOC students, LGBTQ students, neurodivergent students. And they're not just building a learning model where those students can thrive academically. Yes, that's an important part of it, but a learning model where those students can deal with the stresses and the anxieties and the challenges that are already part of other aspects of their life, and learn how to have healthy conversations around those things, learn how to disagree without being disagreeable, learn how to solve problems, uh, group problems in new and unique ways. I gave a presentation a couple years ago, um, connecting the kind of collaborative learning style that is a critical piece of a number of different micro school learning models, and Mike Munger's book, um, Making Decisions in Groups or Choosing in Groups. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but the concepts are the same. And if we can help kids learn different approaches to this at a very early age and learn processes and tools and ways to listen to what other people want, learning what are your principles that you are not willing to compromise on, but then what are maybe your procedures where you are willing to compromise, or other ways, um, and kind of the impact that that's going to have on the future of our society as a whole. uh, we're barely starting to see the very earliest signs of that. um, but I've seen it with my own children here in our home. I've seen it with other children that I know in my community who have been through microschooling experiences, and with the adults who are facilitating the microschools as well. I was not prepared for the amount of personal development that I would undergo
Mm,
as a microschool operator. And I promise you a large number of microschool operators will tell you the same thing, that it
right.
was a period of intense personal growth for them as well. So some of
Mhm.
those things are making me really excited, and that I'm seeing. Also just the innovation, the creativity, really when you the way that we're starting to treat children as human beings first and differentiating them based on age only according to what they need rather than where the power lies, who gets to make decisions, and some of these other things. It's been very, very eye opening for a lot of the adults that I've worked with to have that conversation about shared power with students. So,
Mm,
some really, really exciting trends there.
love it. Well, Tom, I am so glad that Microschool Solutions exists, and am really excited to see what you and Rochelle continue to do in building and growing the organization, and looking forward to keeping in touch there. Again, it's microschool-solutions.com. And
Yep.
Tom Bogle, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm so glad that our paths are able to reconverge again after all of these years. It's been fun catching up with you.